Everything's out right now, that's for sure. All right, thank you all for being here. The mayor should be here momentarily, but we don't want to delay our start any further. So I think a lot of people feel that the joint law enforcement effort on Election Day was a very successful collaboration, that a lot of our concerns about militia people walking around with guns, frightening people away from the polls did not come to pass. Well, that was no accident. That was due to the excellent work of the city of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Police Department, the FBI, the DA's office, among so many others. It was a success. Only slightly by the arrival of two men from Virginia with lock-picking tools, rifle, two guns on their hip, and communications about how they were there to do certain things around the vote count. It is time for this same collaboration to come back. And we all know why. We all understand the atrocious happenings at the US Capitol. We are all aware of the chatter in social media, some of it at this point secret and encrypted, that is calling for violent revolution. Well, we are here together. We are putting the band back together to make sure that the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection remains just that. And there are two sides to that. The one side is we want every single person who voted for whatever candidate, who supports whatever party, to know that you are protected here and that we are united. And it is time to move forward together. But for those people who are bent on violence and are bent on terrifying groups of people or individuals, we have a different message. That message will be by the people who are here to present this united message to you. But let me just give you a taste of something I want you all to understand, because it's important, and we can address it more during questions later. Those two guys had their preliminary hearings this morning. They're both going to go to trial, and they're going to trial on interfering with an election, a felony in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They are going to be held accountable and face a Philadelphia jury for what they did, which is what we promised, and it's what's going to happen. Understand this as well. There may be some people who feel emboldened that they can go to Harrisburg or that they can go to DC, and somehow they're going to be pardoned by a man I consider to be the traitor in chief. Well, no, you're not, because the pardon does not work under state law. The president does not have that power. And this city, this team is going to make sure that there is federal accountability, or there is state accountability, or there is both. If you are under the impression that you can be within the city of Philadelphia doing anything at all in order to carry out criminal conduct in Harrisburg or in DC or anywhere else, you are wrong. And we will be here to explain it to you with handcuffs. Having said that, I would like to take this opportunity to inform on who the speakers are and their sequence. The first speaker will be Mayor Jim Kenney. I'm happy to see that he's with us. Our Philadelphia Police Commissioner, Daniel Outlaw. We have Michael Driscoll, who is the special agent in charge of the Philadelphia FBI field office, with whom we collaborated closely. We have City Council Majority Leader Sherelle Parker, Council Member Curtis Jones, and we also have Senator Vince Hughes. All of them will be coming up and saying a few words in that order. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. So I want to thank the District Attorney for having us here today to discuss this important topic. I think most of us can agree that the insurrection at the Capitol last week threatened the very foundation of our democracy. It's painfully clear that this foundation has fractured over the last 4 years by our sitting president, soon not to be there, thank God. Never in my lifetime did I think that we'd have to question whether we'd experience a peaceful transition of power at the federal level, but it is what it is. And while we continue to hope and pray for peace and safety leading up to and after Inauguration Day, we must also plan and prepare for every alternative that could come our way, just as we did leading up to the general election in November. Last week, in response to the events in Washington, D.C., the city activated the Emergency Operations Center to monitor activity here in Philadelphia. We have continued interagency coordination to monitor for any developments and plan accordingly. The safety and well-being of Philadelphians is our top priority, and we will continue working together to monitor and prepare for any unrest that could arise during the week of inauguration. At this time, we are not advising the closure or boarding up of any businesses. And while we've been in touch with partners, no specific requests for mutual aid have been made. We will keep the public apprised of any changes that are warranted, and we will not lose sight of the right to engage in First Amendment protected activity. But to be clear, violence, vandalism, and other criminal behavior like we witnessed at the Capitol last week will not be tolerated. So now I'll turn it over to our police commissioner who can share more on the department's preparedness. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Thank you. I want to make it known that the Philadelphia Police Department stands ready, along with our fellow stakeholders, in ensuring that a similar scene does not play out here in our city, the birthplace of liberty, on Inauguration Day. To that end, the Philadelphia Police Department continues to plan appropriate safety and response measures with our partner local, state, and federal agencies to ensure the safety of all Philadelphians during the inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. Police personnel will be placed at strategic locations throughout the city to ensure historic landmarks and other government buildings are protected. In addition, officers will be on standby in the event of public demonstrations, as well as incidents of civil unrest. The public can absolutely rest assured that any personnel that are detailed to Inauguration Day posts are not taking away from our ability for the police department to respond appropriately to 911 calls throughout the city. At this particular point in time, we do not have any credible or specific threats to Philadelphia. However, this is a fluid situation, and we will continue to maintain an open line of communication with our partner agencies and the public to ensure information flows in a timely and accurate manner. As always, public safety remains the #1 priority of the Philadelphia Police Department. We look forward to a safe and peaceful Inauguration Day. Thank you.
Now I'd like to call forward Special Agent Mike Driscoll, in charge of the Philadelphia FBI Field Office. Mike.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to take this opportunity to provide a quick update on the actions being taken by FBI Philadelphia since the violence and destruction in the Capitol last week, and what we are planning to do to protect our communities from any further violence. First, know that the FBI will not tolerate rioting or destruction by violent agitators and extremists. We will hold accountable those who participated in the Capitol siege on January 6th. We are using all of our investigative resources to include human source information, advanced technical and scientific tools to identify the perpetrators of this violence. Philadelphia, like many of our field offices, are collaborating with the Washington field office. Our agents and analysts have been processing leads, gathering evidence, sharing intelligence, and working with prosecutors towards appropriate charges. Philadelphia Division agents have so far arrested 2 Pennsylvania residents in connection with the violence at the Capitol. First, Terry Brown, 69, of Myerstown, was arrested on Monday for his violent entry into the Capitol building and related charges. Early this morning, Robert Sanford, 55, of Upper Chichester, Delaware County, surrendered to federal agents on several charges, the most serious of which is assault on a federal officer. Both men are being prosecuted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia. We've conducted extensive work over the past few days, around the clock, not sparing any resources, but unfortunately the work is far from done. We will continue to work closely with our state, local, and preparation for Inauguration Day. Between now and will be maintained posture to monitor for any to gather intelligence and coordinate with our intelligence that we've shared. We are focused right now on identifying, investigating, and disrupting any potential threat of violence. This information based on tips. With that in mind, and this is the most of my comments today, is that I urge anyone who's watching this that if you have any information you wish to share, whether it's about what happened at the Capitol or it's about something that's concerning you, call FBI, or you can go to the website at tips.fbi to submit tips regarding any potential violence, any upcoming events, or if you're specifically worried about active violence, of course, please reach out to the Philadelphia Police Department. We're asking everyone to respect the First Amendment rights of those who might seek to protest legally, but we are asking everyone to report any suspected violent or criminal activity. It's important to note that we cannot do our job without the help of the American public. We need the public's help to protect our city and our communities and the rights of peaceful protesters. The FBI continues to remain steadfast in our mission to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. And I want to add a very specific thanks to our partners in this effort, everyone who's been involved in helping secure, gather intelligence on these threats, everyone from the Philadelphia Police Department, Pennsylvania State Police, to the U.S. Attorney's Office, to the DA's office, and to all of our federal partners that are actively involved in gathering this intelligence. So please, if you've got information to share, we want to hear it. Thank you.
And now I'd like to call forward City Council Majority Leader Sherrill Parker.
Thank you. On behalf of our City Council President, Darrell Clark, all members of council, we're pleased to join with you today, my colleague and our whip, Curtis Jones, along with the chair of our public safety, to support this intergovernmental coalition to protect Philadelphians. We want to make three very specific points. First is ensuring that Philadelphians remain safe during this unprecedented time in our democracy. Second, we want to make sure that Philadelphia employees' constitutional rights to freely speak and associate are protected, but making sure that we hold all employees accountable to ensure that no one employed by our great city violated the law and participated in the riot and insurrection that we saw take place last week in our nation's capital. Finally, we want to remind everyone of the critical role that our great city of Philadelphia, as the birthplace of this democracy, played in making sure that we had a free, fair, and honest counting of those votes that our citizens cast in November. First, ensuring everyone's public safety in the days ahead. Let's be clear, there will be no tolerance for rioting or violence in our city. We know the FBI sent the memo to law enforcement agencies across the country last week, warning of the possible armed protests in all 50 state capitol buildings beginning this weekend. Those of us who are in city council, all of us at large and district, we've constantly gotten calls, people who are concerned. So we know that this is true. We want to urge you, our citizenry, to please do your part as a concerned citizen. If you see something suspicious, say something to our local police department. As you can see here today, we are working together across all channels to ensure that there's a safe transition of power. And most importantly, because we're here, that you, your family, and your friends and your loved ones, that you remain safe. Next, we want everyone to know that we take the First Amendment rights of all to freely associate very, very seriously. Your right to freely speak, to petition the government, and to air grievances will always support those fundamental rights for all, including every one of our city employees. But the First Amendment doesn't give anyone the right to riot or break into the Capitol or participate in any violent insurrection against our government that left 6 people dead, including 2 police officers. In the days ahead, and this is what we have to communicate to our constituents, our Philadelphia Police Department, SEPTA Police, as well as the FBI, they're going to determine if any of our city employees crossed that line and or violated the law. If no one is guilty of anything if they peacefully gathered to voice their opinion. However, those who broke the law, and I thank you, DA Krasner, for doing what we would call making it plain, they will be dealt with accordingly. City Council takes a strong and continuing interest in the accountability of its employees, as well as safeguarding their rights of free expression. There's no room for hate speech anywhere, whether it's at a rally in Washington, where our appropriations chair Vince Hughes is in Harrisburg, or our great city, and even if it's done online or on social media. This isn't the first time the city and or our council have confronted these issues, and we know it won't be the last. Finally, we want to say this. In November, we all watched with pride as our Philadelphia City Commissioners and their hardworking staff counted hundreds of thousands of votes at the Pennsylvania Convention Center. And they did it in such a transparent manner with the eyes of the country and the world upon them to help determine the outcome of the presidential elections. Those commissioners and their staffs, they worked openly, fairly, and honestly. There was even a live webcam feed that monitored everything they did. It was watched around the world. Democracy started here, and Philadelphia played a historic role in November in protecting the ideal of free and fair elections once again. Every president has peacefully handed over power to the next, dating back to 1797, when George Washington stepped down and was succeeded by John Adams. Guess what? We can peacefully transfer power again next Wednesday, and we will. And we thank you to the FBI, to our police commissioner, and to all of our partners, the state police. City Council is here, and we're supportive of your efforts. Thank you.
I now have the honor of calling forward Councilmember Curtis Jones, Chair of the Committee on Public Safety and the Whip.
As Chair of Public Safety, there is an assumption of safety in certain places. When a child goes to school with their teacher in the classroom, that assumption is there. When a judge and a jury and a defendant go into a courtroom and that process continues of justice, there is an assumption of safety. And therefore, when legislators go into the halls, whether it be in Washington, D.C., Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, there is an assumption of safety that they will be allowed to proceed with the business at hand. When the uprising happened in Washington, the reverberations were felt here in Philadelphia, and you can see it today. We are not the city where bad things are allowed to happen. We're going to be prepared. And we want to say to you that we respect all of those safe places. And just because you don't like the decision or the grade you got in school, doesn't mean you get to turn over the desk, doesn't mean you get to disrupt the process. And we're here in Philadelphia to say that we're going to stand by the U.S. Constitution, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the City of Philadelphia Charter to maintain safety for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Last but never least, we have State Senator Vince Hughes for a couple remarks. We'll then take questions, all of us, and provide answers. I hope someone at that time will ask me about the district attorney's hotline, which serves a special purpose. We can provide that at that time. But it is my honor to call forward Pennsylvania State Senator Vincent Hughes.
Thank you, District Attorney Krasner, and to all my friends and guests. It's a great pleasure to be with you at this time, at this moment for this issue. It's not lost on me that about a week before Election Day, a week before November 3rd, we gathered in this same room to make sure that the citizens of Philadelphia and this region knew that there would be no interruption in democracy on Election Day, if I remember correctly, District Attorney. There's a lot of reasons why that conversation had to happen at that time. Some of it just to make sure that folks in our great city knew that their right to vote would not be impeded. Some of us also related to the fact of what the symbol of the city of Philadelphia means to this state and to this nation, and in fact to the world. If you will, the birthplace of democracy. If you will, the birthplace of democracy. And that we had to assure that democracy would be embraced, if you will, District Attorney Krasner, on November 3rd, and the days after, right? Days and weeks after. And that we're here again today to say that the insurrection that occurred last Wednesday, which organized, planned, and from a layman's perspective, had inside cooperation, and I'm just a layman, but had inside cooperation, that was, in some respects, a continuation, District Attorney Krasner, of the attempt to suppress the vote in its largest form, to snatch not just an election, but to, in fact, snatch our country away from its people by violence. You want to make a change, as the councilman would say, as the mayor would say, you have a vote. You have an election. You vote about it. There is no insurrection. Why is it important we gather at this time and make these comments? It plays a significant role. Just in a symbolic fashion, the birthplace of democracy, the Independence Hall, the Constitution Center, they represent the foundation of this nation. The foundation of this nation, maybe more than any other city, they represent the foundation. And we're here with the FBI and our police commissioner and city, our state, to say that we will secure the foundation of the nation, just like we secured our democracy on Election Day and the days after. Now, the state capitol is as someone are going to ask, was already on lockdown prior to, and I can assure you, is much more secure than what it was. Hardened security. Now, you professionals know what that means. Or do I, Commissioner? No, I don't. Thank you very much. All right? But we are a very secure building. All eyes are open, and all preparations are made, and all pre-work is being done, pre-investigations are being done. All the research is coming together to make sure that nothing happens to our state capitol. But this is bigger than a building. This is bigger than a state, a city hall, a federal building. This is the foundation of what we fought for, what we live for, what we vote for. Again, you want to make a change? You want a different outcome? You have an election. You run for office. You state your viewpoints. You have the votes. The votes get counted. You either win or you lose. And if you lose, then you work on the next one. You don't lose and go grab your gun and say, I want another way. We don't do that, do we, Councilman? We don't do that, do we, Councilwoman? Mr. District Attorney, we don't do that, do we? Mr. Mayor, we don't do that, do we? And I only present those individuals because all of us have run for office, all right? All of us have been through this. Securing our democracy, and it will be secured in every way it can be, in total cooperation, work, day of work, and afterwards. And I will say this, any perpetrator, and I can't speak for law enforcement, it's up to my friend with the FBI, district attorney, police commissioner, do that. Down every rat hole and hellhole that they come from and brought to justice. No stone needs to be unturned until we get everyone involved prior, during, and going forward. So I thank you for standing up, and I thank you for inviting me, Mr. District Attorney, to be with you in this moment again, where we now democracy in the full execution of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you all for your wonderful comments. So the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office will have a hotline. Obviously, the first place you may want to call is 911. You should call the Philadelphia Police Department. You have already received a hotline for the FBI. Please call that. But there are on occasion people who are not comfortable for whatever reason, and I don't care what it is, calling one or both of those entities. We have a hotline. It is 215-686-9641, and we are partnering with all of these law enforcement entities to do exactly what we just heard all these great speakers speak about. I know the mayor to be an aficionado of World War II history. My dad, my uncles fought, served. We ain't having Nazis in Philly.
That's right.
That's not happening. I don't care what flavor of Nazi you might think you are.
That's right.
We are not having it. Are there any questions? Yes, please.
This one's for Commissioner Outlaw. So you're saying there won't be any shortage of officers to respond to whatever may happen in Philly on the day of the inauguration. Does that mean all hands on deck, all time off suspended?
So that's exactly what that means. And actually, our preparations are not just for day of inauguration. It's actually the 16th and probably for some days after to ensure that we have even, again, there's been nothing specific. I want to be clear, nothing specific for the city of Philadelphia. But in the event that there is, we will have coverage specific around our critical infrastructures, the buildings that we're talking about here, working in collaboration with the Federal Protective Service, also with SEPTA, the Sheriff's Office for CJC, for example, and then also for the other city buildings. Days off have been canceled. I won't tell you for which day, but we've done everything that we could to ensure that we have adequate coverage moving forward and leaning forward through the Office of Emergency Management for additional resources in the event that those resources are needed.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, do you know if there's any plan for a point on any side of the protest or general First Amendment? And the second one you have, is that office open? The Office of Emergency Management, is that open?
Yes, so we have requested that OEM be activated beginning on Saturday. And we know of some smaller protests here in the city. Actually, I'll just think of one on Sunday with smaller numbers, nothing to give us any reason for concern. But like I said, given that there's information out there for a planned surge on the state capitals, we just want to make sure that we're ready here. But again, nothing very specific that would cause us alarm, only just something to make sure that we're prepared in the event something does spill over here into the city. But yes, we will be very heavy on the day of inauguration and also on the 17th.
There's a little bit, I would say, of a borderline that looks like even on Facebook or social media where people may be speaking about their dissatisfaction with the election erroneously. Is there kind of a time or any sort of wording or things you may be looking out for on social media that people should specifically report? Or is it kind of everything? You know what I'm saying? Like, are there terms or phrases? I've also seen that people are posting numbers now.
So these are very difficult issues. Whenever we're dealing with somebody's First Amendment rights, it is very difficult to make sure that we don't do anything that interferes with that in any way. But with that said, any call for violence will not be tolerated. So if you hear or see something that makes you uncomfortable, because it is asking people to engage in violence, it is talking about the creation and use of weapons. Those are the kind of things we want to hear about. And if you're unsure, reach out to law enforcement and let us help you figure it out. Thank you.
This might be for the mayor, Commissioner, I don't know, but I know you mentioned businesses are not being told to close, no boarding up or anything, but will all the roads and moving around?
Yeah, at this point, there are no road closures planned, other than what I think the River Drive or whatever that's normally closed for recreation purposes, but nothing special is planned for road closures.
So visitors can go kind of walk around the mall, see if they live on any of it.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know.
Yeah, but in the past, though, in the event they're open, we will have resources there in the event we need to make a quick decision to shut down those streets. And then we do so we communicate through our public affairs to let folks know as best as we can the impacted areas, or if they're not just street closures, but if there's rerouting of buses, so on and so forth.
Mayor, should you need the National Guard to come in and help out, how much time do you need to get them before?
How many,
you need
it was
to
a,
get to the city?
usually a few, well, hopefully we won't have to do that. We're not anticipating having to do that. We would be in touch with the governor's office too. And how many hours it takes for them to get, it's not an easy mobilization. I'm not sure the exact number of hours, but hopefully we're not going to have to make that request. But they're very willing and eager to help when they're asked.
Más importante que la gente debe escuchar en estos momentos ante los preparativos con toda esta colaboración, para esta posible podrían dar en algún tipo de...
Ok, creo que entendí casi todo de esa pregunta. Estamos aquí juntos, incluso el alcalde, la jefa de la policía, el jefe de los FBI y yo, como el fiscal de Filadelfia, estamos aquí juntos para señalar que no vamos a permitir violencia en contra de la gente ni el gobierno. Estamos aquí juntos para proteger los derechos que tenemos, las vidas y la seguridad de la gente, toda la gente de Filadelfia.
Estaba dando un ejemplo de los dos que fueron arrestados con los que estaban contando los... Puede comentar algo en español, haciéndole ejemplo a la otra gente si quiere actuar de la misma manera, que van a enfrentar la misma situación.
Ok, tenemos dos personas que tienen cargos en contra de ellos sobre impedir una elección y también tener armas ilegales. En este momento van a juicio. En varios meses van a tener que explicar su conducta ilegal y vamos a decidir la pena a causa de lo que hicieron. No vamos a permitir en Filadelfia la gente que cree que pueden venir con la idea de guerra, de la idea de revolución violenta en contra de la gente. No vamos a permitirlo ni con esos dos, ni con más gente. More or less, sixth grade Spanish, I got that?
Y si puedes decir algo, estaba mencionando que aquí es donde nació la democracia y lo van a seguir defendiendo. Si puedes mencionar algo de eso.
Sí. Ok, vamos a defender la democracia que tenemos aquí, toda la gente de Filadelfia, la gente que han estado aquí, los inmigrantes, vamos a proteger a todos. Okay, are there any more questions? For whom is that question? Okay.
So first, let me be very clear that we take any threat that comes our way seriously. And our primary goal throughout all of this is to ensure we are sharing anything we receive that is threat-related with all of our partners, to the point where if I have to annoy them because I'm just constantly ringing the phone, we will do so. And I know the commissioner will not hesitate to do so as well. So our goal is to ensure that any information is shared. Of course, Philadelphia, being the birthplace of our nation, draws attention and could be a threat due to those reasons. But we've also seen reporting about a variety of cities around the country. And I know that we are working very closely. You've heard Harrisburg mentioned today. We are working extremely closely with Harrisburg Police, with the Pennsylvania State Police to ensure everything is secure there. And we are taking similar steps in cities all across the country.
Commissioner, did you want to add or no?
No, I think we're
No?
good.
Okay, very good. Yes, any other questions? I should let you know that we do have the two attorneys from the DA's office who were in charge of the election task force before, and they are the ones who are taking the lead on the prosecution of the two individuals who came here while the vote was being counted with the AR-15. That is Andrew Welbrock and Brian Collins. I don't know if you have any questions for them, but they're available. Are there any other questions for any? No. Oh, I'm sorry, you have some online. I beg your pardon.
From Chris Palmer of the Fire. They've heard reports that area synagogues are closing on Inauguration Day over fear of possible attacks or violence. Is that accurate? And are police being asked to provide additional security?
So the question from Mr. Palmer, I'll just read the question so that it's on the record, so to speak, and then whoever is in a position to answer it, please help me. But the question from Mr. Palmer is whether or not reports that synagogues are closing, is it churches and synagogues or just synagogues? Synagogues. The question from Mr. Palmer is whether or not there are indications that synagogues are closing on Inauguration Day. That I also know whether the police commissioner would like to comment or the mayor?
If synagogues are closing, it was not at the direction of the police department, and actually, this is the first that I've heard of it. So when I leave here, I'll be sure to make sure that we reach out to our respective synagogues here in the city to ensure that they know there's security.
You know, obviously, that kind of question all by itself is heartbreaking because that's what terrorism is. When you force what they would do in their daily life by terrifying them, that's what terrorism is. Another question?
Do you believe the sales that are being reported in states like Pennsylvania might be connected to an increase in homicides as well?
Who's
Oh, this is for Charlotte Santiago.
I'm sorry,
There's a question about homicides here. Can we talk about what we're here for today, please?
why don't we defer that question for later, maybe after.
And then another question from Annie McCormick. We've noticed security and increase in park rangers. Is this due to recent directly on federal buildings?
Okay, so the question from Annie McCormick is, we've noticed an increase in security around federal buildings and also around Independence Hall, among other places. Is this due to an increase in security by the feds? I think that's what I heard. Is that something that you'd care to answer, sir? Or do you want to answer that? All right, thank you.
So the increased visibility, presence, and security around those locations are not threats. It's our corroboration and earlier park rangers and some of our other partners to be present. Part of the in preparation that I made mention of earlier. Again, there are no specific threats that have been brought to our attention at this time. This is in all abundance of caution.
All right, if there are no more questions in the room, then thank you very much.